Have you ever wondered why you got cancer? That's what we're going to dive into. And there are 10 root cause drivers of cancer that I'm going to go through. Now, you probably know that our immune systems are actually designed to search out and kill rogue cancer cells before they become a tumor. So here's the million-dollar question. Why didn't our body do that? What was blocking it if it was designed to take care of these cancer cells? Our immune systems have actual cells called natural killer cells that go out there and look for rogue cancer cells to kill them. We also have different autophagy processes and proteolytic enzymes that will go out and address them. These mechanisms are built into the design of how our body functions. So why didn't our body use these? I mean, what was going on that stopped your immune system from addressing them? Because this is kind of a big whoops, right? I mean, something takes our immune system offline, but what is it? And how do we find out? Let's dive in and see all the possible things that could have overwhelmed and distracted your immune system. I'm going to go through the 10 root cause drivers of cancer. Now, these are not just Katrina's opinions or thoughts. These are what we see in the research. Things that drive cancer, that are associated with cancer, known carcinogens. This is from the scientific literature. This is not hidden in some vault out there that only a few people know about. It's out there in the public domain. However, most people don't know these things. So if you have someone in your life that's struggling with cancer, please share this with them so they will know and can support their bodies appropriately. Now, some of this stuff you've probably heard about and you know it's important, but oftentimes, people don't think of them in terms of the context of actually causing cancer. Based on the work of my mentor and dear friend, Dr. Nasha Winters, who wrote The Metabolic Approach to Cancer, here are your 10 root cause drivers of cancer. The first root cause driver of cancer is metabolic balance. Now, most of us would agree that sugar isn't good for us, right? But why? So our metabolism is made to go back and forth between using fats or carbohydrates for fuel. Back and forth. We call this metabolic flexibility when it's working well. However, we can get dysregulated for a lot of reasons and end up with blood sugar that runs higher than it should be on a routine basis. Now, when we talk about blood sugar symptoms, we're usually talking about hypoglycemia or low blood sugar, which, can make you feel shaky, hangry, lightheaded, when you go too long without food. But high blood sugar, well, it doesn't feel bad at all. In fact, you often feel great because you've got all this fuel running around your body. And when you have cancer, that extra glucose actually go to feed the tumor. It makes it so much easier for the tumor to get its preferred fuel source in greater abundance. But most people aren't realizing that this is an issue. I know I didn't. I was super defensive about this one because I was eating healthy carbs and, lots of sources were telling me to eat even more with a vegetarian or vegan diet. I was so confused around this area. And, maybe you're feeling that way a little bit too. So this is where you want to test and see what the issues are for you. All right, next is mental and emotional well-being. Now, this one doesn't have as much hard objective research on it. It's more clinical, anecdotal. But what we see consistently is that there's an emotional trauma, usually 1 year prior to a cancer diagnosis. And this shows up in many different ways, from the loss of a loved one or a job to a traumatic event or accident or a crescendo, an abusive relationship. So many different things. But this trauma can literally manifest itself physically in our body and be a contributing driver to cancer. And this is the area that is missed the most of the time in addressing. But please promise me that you won't miss it now because I've pointed it out. Now, we have to talk about the microbiome, right? It's a new buzzword and it's where everything seems to start. So let's define what we're talking about here. I am talking about parasites, both the icky, yucky worms and the microscopic single-cell critters. I'm also talking about our beneficial microbiome, the good guys that make B and K vitamins, all this cool stuff for us. I'm also talking about digestion. Please don't miss this because it's super key. I mean, just feeding your good microbiome or taking probiotics isn't going to do it if you aren't digesting your food. And maybe it's just me, but I find it super offensive that if I'm spending all this money on organic food and expensive supplements and I don't actually get the nutrients I think I'm getting because I'm not digesting them. Inflammation and oxidative stress. So when there is cancer, it's like a house on fire, and it's important to evaluate where the inflammation and oxidative stress are coming from and address those areas as well. Did you know that the largest source of oxidative stress actually comes from our own metabolism? So when we digest carbohydrates, it produces ROS, which are reactive oxidative species. They become oxidative stress if we can't effectively neutralize them with things like antioxidants, which is fine to have some of this normally. But if it gets out of control, well, you can see what we're talking about cancer. We want everything to be working as well as possible. And this is an area we can actually use those inflammation markers to monitor how the body is doing as well with markers like the HSCRP, the SED rate, and the LDH. Are you familiar with the idea that hormones drive cancer? Right, I know. This is what everybody's talking about when they're saying things about, especially breast cancer, HER2 positive, triple negative, all this kind of stuff. So our standard of care's approach is to use drugs to just tank those hormones. No estrogen. It doesn't matter the levels. It just obliterates them blindly. They're not even testing the client's hormones. Not only are they not actually seeing if the client needs to lower their hormones, but they're also not looking at how they're being metabolized, which is how they're being processed for elimination. If it's in an appropriate way or a cancer-driving way using the 4-OH pathway. This is what is now being shown to possibly be more important in terms of cancer than general estrogen levels. They're also not looking at how the gut can put sex hormones back in circulation when they're being marked for elimination with a enzyme called beta-glucuronidase, which is made when the gut is not healthy. They're not looking at the xenoestrogens. Those are the chemicals that we're constantly being exposed to that mimic estrogens and mess with those hormone receptors. These should all be taken in consideration when we're talking about hormones. Often they're just completely ignored. Okay, and then there's the thyroid hormones, which aren't even talked about in most cases. And at best, the TSH is looked at. But this doesn't even tell us half of the picture of how the thyroid may not be creating the energy needed for proper function, not to even mention the energy needed to heal. Okay, let's talk about stress and the circadian rhythm. Now, most people are used to hearing talk about getting enough sleep and reducing stress for health, but are they actually checking to see if this is happening? Looking at those adrenal hormones? And what does it really look like to support these? I mean, so many people have sleep issues nowadays that we really need to have specific metrics to evaluate and strategies to dial this in to a healthy supporting place. Because the magic happens when you're asleep in terms of detox and repair. Now, this is also a great place to mention that while some herbs, such as ashwagandha and maca, are wonderful in general, they can actually be driving cancer pathways if used while cancering. So we want to support what's off with other nutrients. I've had so many clients come to me with, well-meaning herbalists that gave them these because they just weren't trained in the specifics of cancer. And of course, a lot of us read about things like this on the internet and just give it to ourselves, and we would never know this. So here's some information. Make sure you integrate it. Toxins. This is probably the biggest bucket by far. So what are we talking about here? Heavy metals, chemicals, and molds. Now, most people are familiar with the idea that things like aluminum, mercury, lead, arsenic, are toxic. But do you know if you have high levels? Do you maybe need to get some of those, amalgams out or something else to stop the exposure? See, with toxins, people talk all the time about doing a detox. But is it even worth your time and money to bother with a detox if you haven't stopped the inflow, the exposure of that toxin? Okay, chemicals. Now, this is going to include things like glyphosate, parabens, phthalates, BPAs, and so many more that I don't even want to try to pronounce. And this can end up being a full-time job to swap out your products and cost a fortune in order avoiding these chemicals. So would it help to know the ones that you're being exposed to? Would you like to know which chemicals you need to make top priority to focus on just those, not everything? We also want to talk about mold. This is one of those that kind of surprises people. And please hear this well. You do not have to see it, you do not have to feel sick, and you do not have to smell mold in order to be affected in a way that would drive cancer. So there are many known carcinogens in the mold family, and this means they're known to cause cancer. Think about this. It is illegal to sell a house without disclosing to the potential buyers that it has known mold because of how toxic it is. Yet, if somebody has cancer, no one's doing a simple pee test to see if they have high levels of mold, which are known to be carcinogens, to see if that's part of like their cancer profile of what's causing it. So they just do their standard of care. They go do their chemo, radiation, surgery, whatever. And the patient stays in their little moldy house and everyone just prays and crosses their fingers that the cancer doesn't come back. Does this seem logical to you? Does this make sense? So at the beginning, I mentioned that the immune system should be taking care of the rogue cancer cells as they form, so they don't get out of control and create, a tumor. But what if there were things directly messing with the immune system? Things like autoimmune conditions where the immune system's in overdrive, or things like low vitamin D levels, which is a deficiency that hinders the immune system's functioning. Maybe things like a viral infection that the immune system's already fighting and busy with. This is super common, and we can test for things like Epstein-Barr virus and see the viral load. So let's free up that immune system so it can get out there and kill those cancer cells. Angiogenesis and metastasis. Metastasis, you probably know, this is when the cancer has left the original organ and started a new tumor in a different organ or tissue. I don't think anyone needs to hear that we don't want that. Okay, now remember back when I mentioned that the tumor's favorite food was glucose from the blood. In order to grow really, really fast, like tumors often like to do, they need more fuel. Like just stating the obvious, right? So the tumor is actually going to signal your body to make more blood vessels for it, which will bring it more glucose to help it grow faster. This whole process of forming new blood vessels is called angiogenesis. And there's markers that we can evaluate to see if this is going on. And even more exciting, there's things we can do about it to slow this down without drugs even. Genetics. This is what most of cancer is blamed on. Have you heard that cancer happens probably because of genetics? It's probably in your family history. Have you heard that? Would it surprise you to know that less than 5 to 10% of cancers are caused by genetics alone? I know I was more than a little shocked at those stats when I first heard it. I grew up hearing that this is the cause of cancer. It's genetics, bad genes. Why am I looking at genetics then? The genetic tests that I'm looking at are very different than what oncologists are looking at. So there's the ancestral genetics, there's oncological genetics, and these are what's called low penetrance genetics. Okay, let me back up. So epigenetics is this new field you've probably heard of that is talking about where the diet and lifestyle, so the choices you make every day, can turn on and turn off these genetics. The low penetrance ones are the ones they have the most effect on. This is powerful. It means that you are not just destined to get cancer no matter what, even if you have things like BRCA. This is where you have amazing power. Does this feel empowering to you too? So just to know how to adjust your diet and lifestyle to turn on and off these genetic hiccups, I get kind of excited about this part. Now, okay, with these 10 areas that drive cancer, you've got to know that it's never one reason for cancer. Okay, I talk more about this in another video, so check that out. But I want to say it again, there's never just one thing that's causing the cancer. So in order to, overwhelm our immune systems, it takes 7 or 8 of these root cause drivers to be out of whack in order for the immune system to not be able to do its job of keeping those rogue cancer cells in check. Okay, so it's not one thing, and this is why there's not that magic bullet, and that's what the video is on to explain that part. But these are different 7 or 8 things for each person. Everybody's unique in which of these and how they combine to create that perfect storm of 7 or 8 areas. So Can you identify some of your possible root cause drivers from these descriptions that I just gave you? Do you have an idea of which areas might be issues for you? Because it takes a lot to distract our immune systems in that kind of way. So we know from research that cancer is a multifactorial disease. We know this. It doesn't just happen with one thing. Our bodies are so well designed. They're resilient. And we have backup systems for our backup systems, which is a beautiful thing. But when you have so many things going wrong with these 10 areas, it creates this perfect storm and the immune system's just overwhelmed and it can't deal with it all. It can only do so much. And then it can possibly drop the ball on allowing a tumor to form. Does this make sense to you? Okay, let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear which of these root cause drivers of cancer you think might be issues from you. Whether this is, you don't have cancer, you do have cancer, or you had cancer, I would love to hear in the comments. So just know there's hope, and I'm here to help you find it.